Ghostrunner it's okay really, like it's a fine game, but you know what? Let's talk about it. During the first few hours of Ghostrunner, I was enamored by it. The fast and smooth gameplay gave me that Genji game I always wanted by letting me slice through my foes with my katana while running across walls and dashing through the air at breakneck speeds. There's a great flow gameplay provides when you're effortlessly chaining together a variety of different moves to overcome enemies and platforming levels that create this grand sense of momentum. And Ghostrunner has some swag. It's got some steez, okay? The character design of the main protagonist is slick. Like, what's not cool about a futuristic robot ninja that takes out enemies with a katana? I don't know. Couple that together with a banger EDM soundtrack that never gets old, and you have the makings of a great game. Yet, the farther I got into Ghostrunner, the more annoyed and frustrated I got by some of its design choices. Whether it was the story, the controls, the random difficulty spikes, or a few other things, Ghostrunner ends up being wasted potential. Now, don't get me wrong, Ghostrunner is a good game. It's just not a memorable one. Ghostrunner is a first-person action platformer in the vein of Katana Zero or Hotline Miami, meaning that if you get hit once, you have to restart an encounter or platforming section from the beginning. You have a variety of different mobility abilities that allow you to traverse the levels with relative ease. These abilities also give you the option to position yourself in a way that makes killing your enemies much easier. When it comes to combat, the only weapon you have access to is your trusty katana, and you're able to take out enemies with a single deadly swing. Set in the far future in a cyberpunk-esque dystopian city, your job is to kill anyone and anything in your path to liberate the people of said city. You play as Jack, a cybernetic ninja that randomly regains consciousness one night and begins slaughtering people for no apparent reason. And here is where one of my biggest gripes with Ghostrunner begins. The writing in Ghostrunner is so incredibly bad and predictable. Ghostrunner is cringy, and it's not even the good type of cringy that makes me laugh. It's the bad type where I found myself constantly rolling my eyes and wanting every character to shut the hell up when they were talking. I hated every character I came across, and that's not an exaggeration, I swear. Jack and all the characters you interact with are all caricatures we've seen 1,000 times before in a bunch of different sci-fi movies and video games. They're bland, boring, and stale, and the dialogue they spit out is beyond cheesy. And the story's only purpose is to move you from level to level, never weaving together a good reason as to why you're doing the things you're doing. There'll be giant exposition dumps in between platforming sections, and there's no genuine character development for any of the characters. Not to mention that the mediocre voice acting doesn't do anything to sell the story or the characters' motivations either. Ghostrunner is a short game. It's around maybe 6 hours, maybe 7 if you're struggling a bit, but it felt way longer than that due to the game's narrative and how bad the characters are. The writing made it much more of a chore than a fun experience. To its credit though, Ghostrunner's main focus is its, at times, buttery smooth gameplay. Movement in Ghostrunner can be incredibly enjoyable. Wall running and jumping around the environment is incredibly easy, and all the levels give you multiple ways for you to approach an enemy engagement. The levels are littered with grappling hook points and rails for you to grind on, further emphasizing its focus on movement. You're meant to be constantly moving, jumping, and sliding. The speed you gain from moving from one point to another, while quickly taking out enemies along the way, is where Ghostrunner shines. I felt so badass when I got through an entire encounter in what felt like a single motion. Going from wall running, to dashing towards the enemy, to slicing through that enemy, to dodging an incoming attack in slow motion, to grapple hooking away to regain speed, gave me a rush. The agility you have within this world makes the game so enjoyable to play. Now earlier, I did say it can be incredibly enjoyable, and I also said that at times, it can be incredibly buttery smooth. The reason for this is because the game is so incredibly sensitive in the way you use your mobility. There were multiple times where I couldn't wall run on a wall despite me being at a good enough angle for me to initiate it. I would get so frustrated when I was vibing in a level only to have my momentum come to a complete halt because the game failed to register a wall run, a jump, or a mantle. Level design in the later half of the game also lacks enough visual cues to indicate where I could and could not go. I'd be in the middle of a level, running at top speed, only to have to come to a complete stop to get a sense of where I was or where I could go. This became extremely irritating in combat scenarios where I would die because I had to stop to see where the level wanted me to go, resulting in me dying from an off-screen attack. And some levels are just plain bad. There are these puzzle levels that are sprinkled throughout the entire game, but they're completely boring and unimaginative because they get rid of what makes the game fun to play: the movement. Worse, some of these levels have a gimmick that's tacked on for the sake of trying to make it cool or trippy, and it often fails at doing so and it comes off as annoying. To add more gas to the fire, the game ramps up the difficulty out of nowhere. I get games get harder as you progress through them, but the way that Ghostrunner does it is crazy. The last third of the game introduces these enemies that cannot be taken out by your sword, and they explode when you're near them. Not only that, but they fucking chase you. So in a level that's already filled with enemies that have a variety of different weapons and abilities, these little guys constantly follow you around, and you don't even have a second to actually think about how you want to tackle a situation, which results in multiple frustrating and irritating deaths. To call Ghostrunner an ugly game would be a huge lie. The environments have a good amount of detail in them, and some of the landing is very nice. But I will say, Ghostrunner is plain? Is plain the right word? I'll take plain for 800, please. In other words, it's just unoriginal. This is a cyberpunk-esque world we've seen before, but a lot more boring. There's nothing really striking about the world or the levels, and there's nothing that makes it its own. Throughout the 6 or 7 hour campaign, Ghostrunner does a great job at keeping things fresh. Each new level brought a new enemy type to overcome, and while you start off only facing low-level thugs with pistols, you'll be facing off against katana-wielding henchmen and teleporting badasses by the end of the game. Taking out enemies requires different approaches. For example, taking out shield enemies can only be done if you attack them from behind, and katana henchmen can only be taken out if you parry their attacks at the right time. Now, my favorite thing about Ghostrunner is the bumping soundtrack, okay? The soundtrack is so good that it makes the most frustrating moments in this game bearable. It seemed that every level and encounter had its own track, and it showed great diversity in terms of its soundtrack. When I say this soundtrack has bops, it has bops. It's one of those rare soundtracks that I want to have downloaded on my phone because it's that good. Ghostrunner isn't a bad game. It's a good fun time. While there are some glaring problems, I never regretted buying Ghostrunner. Despite its writing being laughably bad, despite the random difficulty spikes, despite its uneven levels, Ghostrunner is a game you should play if you have an extra $30 lying around. It does offer some of the best first-person platforming sections I've seen in quite some time. Now, it's no Titanfall 2, but it does get pretty close at times.